At 3:14 a.m., I was desperately bracing my shoulder against the lookout tower door as something heavy, wet, and rhythmic clawed at the wood from the outside. National Park rangers witness things deep in the wilderness that defy explanation, from whispering metallic spheres to entities that mimic our own voices. Let these unsettling, true encounters ease you into a deep, uneasy sleep. Story 1, The Whispering Sphere. This happened to me in the fall of 2019, when I was working nights as a park ranger in Yellowstone National Park. My beat covered a restricted sector, a sprawling, untamed wilderness rarely visited by tourists, full of ancient forests and forgotten geothermal features. It was a privilege, really, to be the sole human witness to the park's nocturnal rhythms, miles from any light pollution or the drone of traffic. I loved those solo overnight patrols, the deep silence broken only by the hoot of an owl or the rustle of unseen wildlife. My old but reliable Ford F-150, affectionately nicknamed Old Faithful, became an extension of myself, navigating winding gravel roads and rough trails with practiced ease. The solitude wasn't lonely, it was a profound connection to something elemental. My shift usually ran from 8 p.m. to 4 a.m., often extending a little longer if I found something interesting or just couldn't pull myself away from the majesty of a moonlit canyon. The crisp, clean air, perpetually smelling of pine, damp earth, and distant geothermal steam, was a fragrance that now, even years later, brings a strange comfort mixed with a persistent shiver down my spine. It was a life of quiet purpose, the kind of existence that grounds a man. I'd spent years living in West Yellowstone, a small town just outside the park, and thought I knew every rock, every gully, every shadowed grove within my jurisdiction. My routes, like the long P-17 trail, were etched into my memory, familiar companions in the vast darkness. This routine, this predictability, was the bedrock of my world, a world I cherished and guarded. One particular night, the last week of October, things felt off. The sky was an inky canvas, not a single star visible, and the usual chorus of nocturnal animals was eerily absent. Even the wind, which usually whispered through the lodgepole pines, seemed to hold its breath. I attributed it to an upcoming cold front, perhaps, or a migratory shift I hadn't yet been briefed on, trying to rationalize the growing unease. But deep down, my gut was clenching, telling me this was something more than just weather. The silence was too absolute, too unnatural, a predator's hush. As I navigated the winding P-17 trail, a dirt track that dead-ended at an old, disused fire watch tower, my headlights caught something unusual. Not a deer, not a bear, but a flicker of light deep within the dense forest where no light should be. It was intermittent, almost a pulse, too rhythmic to be a natural phenomenon like lightning. My duty, and a nagging, almost irresistible curiosity, compelled me to investigate. I parked my truck on the shoulder, grabbing my heavy-duty flashlight and my service sidearm, standard protocol for anything unknown in a restricted zone. The familiar weight of the pistol was a small comfort in the burgeoning strangeness, though I knew it was useless against whatever this was. The forest canopy immediately swallowed the faint glow of the distant park roads, plunging me into a darkness that felt thicker than usual. The air grew colder with each step, a damp chill that seeped into my bones, tasting faintly of ozone and something metallic. Every rustle of leaves sounded amplified, every shadow seemed to stretch and writhe, just at the periphery of my vision. The light pulsed again, brighter this time, a soft, ethereal blue, drawing me deeper into the woods, off the established trail. The undergrowth was surprisingly clear, almost as if a path had been freshly made, though I knew this area was usually thick with thorny bushes and fallen timber. My boots crunched on fallen leaves, but no other sound dared to break the oppressive silence that now felt less peaceful and more menacing. I found the source in a clearing, one I'd never seen before despite years patrolling this sector. It was unnaturally perfect, a precise circle of emerald grass amidst the rugged wilderness, framed by ancient pines that stood sentinel-like. And in the very center, hovering a few inches above the pristine ground, was the most extraordinary object I had ever witnessed. It was a sphere, perfectly smooth and utterly black, like a polished piece of obsidian that drank in all the surrounding light. It was about 8 feet in diameter, shimmering with that faint, internal blue light I'd seen, and emitting a low, rhythmic hum that vibrated through the ground and up into my chest. My mind, trained for the practicalities of a ranger's life, struggled to process its impossible perfection, its alien geometry. My first instinct was professional: report it, establish a perimeter, wait for backup. I reached for my radio, a sturdy Motorola always clipped to my belt, but all I got was static, a harsh hiss that mocked my attempts to connect. I tried different channels, moved my position, but nothing. The deep woods here were notorious for dead zones, but this felt different, deliberate, as if the very air was actively blocking my signal. As I stared, a prickle of unease started to spread from my gut, a feeling my body registered long before my mind could articulate it. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, an instinctive warning. The sphere began to subtly expand, a silent, smooth growth. Not rapidly, not violently, but with an almost imperceptible growth, as if breathing. Its surface rippled, not like water, but like solid velvet shifting under an unseen pressure, and the rhythmic hum deepened, resonating within my skull. It felt less like a sound and more like an internal vibration, a silent bass note in my very being. A faint whisper, not of sound but of pure thought, brushed the edges of my consciousness. It was a plea, formless and ancient, brimming with an unbearable loneliness. My hands grew clammy, a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead, but my feet, against my will, took a step closer. My training screamed at me to retreat, to observe from a distance, but that silent, aching call was too potent to ignore. The sphere continued its slow, deliberate growth, now noticeably larger, perhaps 10 feet across, dwarfing me. The air around it grew heavy, thick with that metallic, ozone smell, and the internal hum was now a persistent thrumming deep within my bones. It felt like my very cells were vibrating in sympathy, falling into sync with something alien. The plea intensified, no longer a whisper but a resonant echo in my mind, a desperate yearning for connection that threatened to unravel my very thoughts. My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of warning, but my mind was clouded, drawn in by an alien empathy. I felt an irresistible urge, a compulsion that overrode every instinct for self-preservation, to touch it, to answer the silent cry. My hand, as if guided by an invisible force, reached out. My fingertips, cold and trembling, brushed its impossibly smooth, cool surface. A jolt, not of electricity but of pure information, surged through me. It wasn't just a plea, it was a deluge of longing, of eons of isolation, a consciousness trapped and desperate. It showed me images, fleeting visions of cosmic distances, of endless dark, of stars dying in silent agony. The sphere expanded rapidly now, swelling to 15, then 20 feet across, its black surface stretching like liquid night. The hum crescendoed into a deafening roar within my head, a symphony of alien suffering. It felt like my skull itself was a bell being struck, vibrating with an unbearable pitch, threatening to split open. The telepathic plea became a frantic, desperate scream. Connect. Release. Understand. It wasn't a voice, it was raw agony searing through my neural pathways, demanding a response, demanding me. My body stiffened, muscles locking as if paralyzed, my gaze fixed on the expanding void before me. I was an anchor, and it was dragging me down, a puppet on invisible strings, utterly helpless. I tried to pull back, to wrench my hand away, but it was stuck fast, fused to the sphere's surface by an invisible, powerful force. My legs buckled, and I fell to my knees, staring into its infinite blackness, which now seemed to stretch into a void, pulling at my very essence. My mind raced, screaming for escape, but my body felt heavy, immovable, almost willing to surrender to the inevitable. I could feel my memories, my identity, being siphoned, absorbed, replaced by an overwhelming sense of cosmic dread. Names, faces, cherished moments, they were flickering, dimming, like lights going out one by one in my internal world. My very being was being unmade, piece by agonizing piece, dissolving into the alien consciousness. My radio, miraculously, sputtered to life, a sudden burst of static cutting through the mental cacophony. It was a lifeline, a tiny window back to reality, a desperate echo of the human world. I knew, somehow, it was my last chance. With a desperate, primal scream that tore at my throat, I clawed at my belt, grabbing the radio, pressing the transmit button. My fingers, slick with sweat, fumbled against the cold plastic. My voice was a choked, garbled mess, unrecognizable even to myself, a desperate plea for help that would never truly reach anyone. It's pulling me, the sphere, I can't. My words dissolved into pure static, choked off by a sudden, intense suction. The blackness surged forward, encompassing me entirely. I felt a tearing, a stretching, a horrific moment of pure, unadulterated terror as my consciousness fragmented, my body twisted and pulled into the impossible void. It felt like being ripped apart from the inside out, every fiber of my existence screaming. The metallic taste in my mouth was overwhelming, like blood mixed with something alien and corrosive. It burned, searing my tongue. My lungs emptied, my vision blurred to nothing but the encroaching darkness. There was an agonizing pop, like something severing deep within my being, a final, definitive break from everything I was. My last conscious thought was of the blackness, not just surrounding me, but entering me, filling every crevice of my being. It was cold, silent, and utterly complete. Then, nothing. Just a vast, terrifying emptiness where I once was, where my memories and my very soul had dissolved. I don't know how long I was gone. Weeks, maybe months. The official report said 3 days. They found my truck then, abandoned 10 miles deeper in the forest than I'd ever driven, the engine still running, the driver's side door wide open. There was a strange metallic residue, like powdered iron, clinging to the steering wheel, and a faint, acrid smell lingering in the cab, a scent no one could identify, a scent I now recognize as it. I woke up naked and disoriented, shivering uncontrollably on a remote hiking trail, 25 miles from where my truck was found. My skin was caked with dried mud, my body aching as if I'd run for days, as if I'd been stretched and reassembled. I had no memory of escaping, no recollection of the journey back. My clothes were gone, my equipment vanished. I was just, deposited, a broken thing left on the forest floor. All that remained was the phantom ache in my hand where I touched the sphere, a constant, dull throb under my skin, and the echoing silence of that alien plea in the deepest corners of my mind. They never found the clearing. They never found the sphere. The Park Service closed off that entire sector, citing increased geothermal activity, a convenient, bureaucratic lie, because they couldn't explain the truth. But I know what happened. I feel it, every single night, a faint, rhythmic hum that vibrates behind my eyes, a constant, chilling reminder. It left its mark. And sometimes, when I'm alone in the dark, I hear a whisper, not of sound, but of pure thought, calling to me. It's subtle, alluring, and promises release, promises to finish what it started. And if you ever find yourself walking in silence so deep it feels unnatural, and you see a light that shouldn't be there, turn around. Don't look at it. Don't listen to its plea. Because some things, once seen, can never truly be unseen. And some pleas, once heard, can never truly be forgotten. They become a part of you. Story 2, Echoes in the Tower. This happened to me in the fall of 2019, when I was working nights at Glacier National Park. My job was primarily maintenance and fire watch, which often meant lone patrols of the more remote sections, especially the old fire towers. It was a good job, quiet, offering a solitude that, in those days, I both craved and dreaded. My routine involved a drive up a winding, unpaved service road, barely more than a deer trail, to Fire Watch Tower 11, deep in the park's northern sector. I'd usually arrive around 10 p.m., do a quick perimeter check, log in, and spend the next 8 hours monitoring the vast, silent wilderness. The air up there was always crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth, and the stars were so bright they looked painted onto a velvet canvas. I'd inherited the night shift from a veteran ranger who swore the isolation eventually got to you, made you hear things. I just figured he was getting old. For me, the quiet was a comfort, a balm to the ache in my chest that had settled there since Sarah, my younger sister, passed away unexpectedly the year before. The vastness of the park somehow made my grief feel smaller, more manageable. Sometimes I'd just sit in the tower's glass-enclosed cabin, staring out at the shadowed peaks and valleys, her memory a dull throb. I missed her laugh, her slightly sarcastic comments, her habit of always humming off-key. But the park offered a strange sort of peace, a way to process everything without the constant, well-meaning questions from family and friends back in town. It was just me, the wilderness, and the occasional crackle of the two-way radio. Just a normal night, I told myself, every time I started the familiar drive up Route 73. One particularly still night, about a month into my rotation, the quiet was almost oppressive. Not a breath of wind, no crickets, nothing. I was making my rounds, checking the tower's foundation for erosion, when I heard it. A faint, almost imperceptible whisper, carried on a non-existent breeze. It sounded like a child's voice, distant, calling something I couldn't quite discern. I stopped, my hand on the cold, rough stone of the tower base. I strained my ears, but there was only the vast silence again. Must have been the wind, I thought, or an owl, or my imagination playing tricks in the dead of night. I shook my head, chuckled at my own jumpiness, and continued my inspection, telling myself that veteran ranger had a point about isolation. A few nights later, it happened again. I was inside the cabin, logging my hourly status report, when a clearer sound drifted up from the darkness below. It wasn't just a whisper this time, it was a fragment of a melody, a lullaby, almost. It was the tune Sarah used to hum when she was little, a silly, made-up song only she knew the words to. A chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air traced its way down my spine. I snapped the radio back into its cradle, my heart starting to thump against my ribs. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding far too loud in the sudden quiet. "Is anyone out there?" No response. Just the silence pressing in, thick and heavy. I grabbed my flashlight, a powerful beam that could cut through the blackest night, and scanned the woods immediately surrounding the tower. Nothing. Not a twig broken, not a rustle. The next week, the whispers returned with unnerving regularity, always from the same general direction, the thick, ancient forest that stretched out east of the tower, a section rarely patrolled due to its impassable terrain. They were clearer now, distinct words mixed with the phantom humming. "Michael," they'd murmur, my name, soft and drawn out, almost like a sigh. And then, "Come play." That last phrase, "come play," hit me like a physical blow. It was something Sarah used to say all the time when we were kids, a secret invitation to whatever mischief we were planning. My breath hitched in my throat. This wasn't just my imagination anymore. This was too specific, too personal. I tried to rationalize it, a hiker, a prank, someone messing with the Lone Ranger. But no one came this far out. I radioed dispatch, my voice tight. "This is Ranger Miller, Tower 11. I'm picking up some unusual noises, possibly human activity, East Sector. Requesting advice." The dispatcher, old Frank, sounded groggy. "Negative, Miller. No personnel in that sector. Could be an animal, maybe some wind. Just log it, carry on." He clearly thought I was just imagining things. I didn't press it. How could I explain? But the whispers grew bolder, more insistent. They started forming coherent sentences, fragments of conversations Sarah and I had, inside jokes that no one else could possibly know. "Remember the treehouse?" a voice, undeniably hers, would sigh from the darkness. Or, "Don't tell Mom about the cookies." My rational mind screamed that it was impossible, that Sarah was gone, buried under 6 feet of earth. Yet, my heart, a raw, exposed nerve, yearned to believe. What if it was her? What if some part of her was out there, lost, needing me? It was a terrible, desperate hope. I started spending less time inside the tower, drawn to the railing, leaning out, straining to hear, to understand. The whispers were like a siren song, pulling me towards the dark, unseen depths of the forest, promising answers, promising her. One night, after hours of enduring Sarah's plaintive, pleading whispers, calling me to her, begging me to just come find me, Michael, I couldn't take it anymore. The moon was a sliver of white against the black sky, offering no light. The air was thick with the scent of pine needles and something else, something subtly foul, like damp, undisturbed earth and a hint of something metallic, coppery. My heart hammered. My training, every ounce of common sense, screamed at me to stay put, to stay safe inside the reinforced steel and glass of the tower. But the voice, it sounded so genuinely distressed, so much like my lost sister. It had been nearly a year since I'd heard her voice, and the raw, desperate need in the whispers was an irresistible hook. I grabbed my most powerful spotlight, my radio, and my sidearm, and stepped out onto the catwalk. Sarah. I called, my voice cracking, echoing unnervingly into the void. Sarah, where are you? The whispers intensified, now seemingly coming from just below the tower's base, deep within the tangled undergrowth. Here, Michael. Just a little further. I'm scared. It was her exact tone, a childhood tremor that used to break my heart. Against my better judgment, I descended the steel ladder, each rung groaning under my weight. My spotlight cut a trembling swath through the absolute darkness, illuminating only small, claustrophobic patches of trees and brush. The whispers led me deeper, past the tower's immediate perimeter, onto an old, unused game trail that wound its way into the denser forest. The air grew colder, heavy with an unnatural stillness. I walked for what felt like miles, following the seductive, mournful voice. Michael, I'm cold. Help me. I can't see, Michael. The voice was always just ahead, just out of reach, a will-o'-the-wisp guiding me deeper into the labyrinthine woods. I tripped over roots, scraped my hands on thorny bushes, my adrenaline coursing through me, blurring the line between hope and terror. Then, I saw it. A glint of something white, caught in my spotlight's beam, near a gnarled old juniper tree. My heart leaped. Sarah. I whispered, scrambling forward, my breath catching in my throat. It was a small, tattered piece of fabric, a swatch of the floral print from her favorite blanket, the one she'd had since she was a baby. It was impossible. My mind reeled. As I reached for it, a sudden, sharp crackle burst from my radio, followed by static, then a low, guttural growl that wasn't human, wasn't animal. It was a sound that seemed to vibrate in my bones, a deep, ancient malevolence that extinguished all hope. The fabric felt cold and brittle, not like cloth at all, but like dried, brittle skin. The whispers around me stopped. The silence that followed was worse than any sound. It was an absence, a void, an emptiness that swallowed every other sensation. My fingers, still clutching the sickeningly dry fabric, began to tingle with a terrifying cold. My mind screamed the horrifying truth: this wasn't Sarah. This was something that knew Sarah, something that was using her to lure me into its domain. Panic seized me. My blood ran cold. I dropped the gruesome scrap of fabric and stumbled backward, turning to flee. But the woods weren't empty now. The darkness pressed in, heavy, suffocating. I could hear breathing. Not human breathing. A ragged, wet rasp, impossibly close. It was all around me. The whispers returned. Not just Sarah's voice now. Others. Dozens of them. A cacophony of lost, echoing pleas, all distorted, all calling my name. Michael. Help us. Join us. They came from every direction, surrounding me. The trees seemed to lean in, their branches like grasping claws. I was trapped. I ran, blindly, through the undergrowth, toward where I thought the tower should be. Branches whipped at my face. Roots snaked under my feet. The horrible breathing kept pace, closer, closer. I could feel its icy breath on my neck. A sudden, jarring cold enveloped me, colder than any winter night. I crashed through a thicket, my lungs burning, and saw the tower looming, a dark silhouette against the faintest glow of the pre-dawn sky. I scrambled up the ladder, my hands raw, my muscles screaming. I burst into the cabin, slamming the heavy steel door shut, twisting the deadbolt frantically. It held. For a moment. I leaned against it, gasping, my eyes wide and darting. The cabin was utterly silent, but I could hear it outside. A heavy thud against the steel plate below, then a scraping sound, like immense claws dragging across metal. The floor vibrated beneath my feet. I fumbled for the radio, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Dispatch. This is Miller. Emergency. Code red. I need immediate backup at Tower 11. There's something out here. Something, not human. It's trying to get in. My voice was a desperate, hoarse croak. A deafening crash against the door ripped through the cabin. The steel buckled inward, groaning. The deadbolt shrieked, then snapped. I dropped the radio. Its static-filled call for help echoed uselessly. The door splintered. A massive, shadowy form began to push through the gap. Two eyes, large and black, gleamed from the darkness. A guttural shriek, utterly devoid of humanity, tore through the air, vibrating the very glass of the tower. It wasn't my scream. The transmission from Tower 11 suddenly went dead. The last thing Frank at dispatch heard was a brief, piercing shriek, followed by silence. They found the tower later that morning. The heavy steel door was wrenched open, bent inwards, and the deadbolt was shattered. The cabin was empty. No trace of Ranger Michael Miller. The radio lay on the floor, its microphone tangled. There was no sign of a struggle, no blood, nothing. Just the chilling absence. The cold, empty air of the tower. And a faint, lingering scent of damp earth and something deeply, terribly wrong. If you ever find yourself alone in the deep woods, and you hear a voice calling your name, a voice you know, a voice you miss, don't answer it. And if you ever find an empty watchtower, high in the mountains, with a broken door and an unnatural silence, don't step inside. Because some echoes are meant to draw you in, and some absences are never truly empty.